So I wanted to do a little video on how to do less is more. I posted this piece in a Facebook group recently, and there were a lot of comments on how tricky it is to do something that's really simple and minimalistic without it ending up kind of boring. Also, if you start to think it's boring, you'll start overdoing it, which is also really annoying. So if you feel like your minimalistic pieces are turning out a bit boring and they need a little something extra, I got some simple tips and tricks you can use to make them a lot more interesting. So I'm going to give you these 5 tips really quickly, using this as an example, and then I'm going to make a quick little less is more piece where I'm going to try and follow my own advice. So, tip number 1 is shapes and sizes. On this one, I only got 4 different spots of ink, but they're all slightly different in size and shape. This one over here is the biggest. This is slightly smaller, again a bit smaller and a bit more round, and the last is sort of long and dragged out. If they were all round and the same size, it would be a bit boring to look at. So create some different shapes and sizes. Tip number 2, create a sense of movement. Make sort of a center of the piece and then work your way out in different directions. Leave little gaps in between. This is diagonal, but it's still a bit flowy instead of just a straight line. So create movement by working in different directions. Tip number 3 is contrast. Even though I've only used black on this, I've created a lot of contrast by doing sort of these wispy fades so that the black ink turns into many different shades of gray, and in the center of the piece it is completely black. So even if you're only using one color, try to create a lot of contrast. If all the ink on this was basically just black or really dark gray, again, it would be a bit boring to look at. Tip number 4, and this is especially if you're only using one color, add some metallics. Metallics just add something interesting to basically any kind of piece, but especially to a really simple piece like this, it will just make it pop. So, tip number 5, I'm going to give you that in a minute, and I'm just going to get started on this little piece. So here we go. I'm only going to use one color on this one too. This is Ranger Current and Brass. I'm just going to start by putting just a little bit of ink and brass and a tiny bit of isopropyl down, and I'm just going to dry it. I'm not going to start doing anything special yet. But I like to do this sometimes also because, and this is a little extra tip for you. This is not tip number 5. This is a bonus tip. If you find it difficult when you start working on a piece, you put down your ink and your isopropyl and it starts moving way too much. It ends up a lot further away from where you wanted it to be because it just flows so easily on the paper. If you have some ink and maybe also some brass that is already dry on the paper, and then you add more ink and start working on it, and you can see it actually happening right now. The ink and the metallic that was already on the paper and dry, it acts like sort of a barrier. It will sort of help you, it will sort of stop the new ink and isopropyl from moving too far. It kind of stops a little bit of where the dry ink already was, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but it can really help you keep the ink where you want it to be without floating all the way to the other side of the paper. So if you find it difficult to sort of control how far it moves, add some ink and some brass and dry it up before you start doing what it is you want to do. Just starting on the sort of second fade right now. They're a little bit different in shape and sort of slightly different directions on this going out to each side. So I think this is starting off pretty well. I'm going to do one right here that is going straight out to the side of the paper, and I'm going to try and make this a little more round. Now, while I'm just doing this, I'm going to start talking about tip number 5. This tip is actually not so much about how you make your very simple piece interesting. This is a tip more about how to stop yourself from overdoing it, because that is like the easiest thing to do with ink, is to do too much. I think we all know that. We've all been there. And that is what tip number 5 is about. Let's say you have a plan. You want to do something very simple. You want to do less is more. You start working on your piece and you actually get to a point where you're thinking, this is actually very simple and minimalistic. This might just be the way I wanted it to be. And then what happens is, and this has happened to me many times, and I'm pretty sure it's happened to a lot of you, once you're sort of almost satisfied with your very simple piece, you start hearing this little voice inside of your head, and it's saying, don't stop now. This is too boring. This is too simple. You need to do more. Put more ink on your paper and just keep going. It is a very, very annoying little voice that is only there to distract you from doing what you actually wanted to do. And then what happens is you listen to that voice and then you keep working on your piece. You add more ink, and 10 minutes later, you have filled up the entire piece of paper, and it is nothing like you wanted it to be. You wanted it to be simple, and now you just got a great big mess. Does this sound familiar to anyone? You ended up completely overdoing it. So this is actually what tip number 5 is about. Once you start hearing that little annoying voice inside of your head that tells you to keep going, tip number 5, do not listen to it. Do not listen. Just block it out. Tell it to get out of your head. I think I'm not the only one who's experienced this. So do not listen to that little voice. My advice instead is just walk away from your piece. Just leave it there, walk away, and don't look at it like until later that day. Maybe don't look at it until the next day. Because what happens is you come back to it the next day and you see it completely differently. You will look at it, and I think like 95% of the time, you will know exactly whether or not it's finished. You will see it very, very differently. Sometimes you will know it's done. It's simple and minimalistic, just like I wanted it to. Maybe you know that it needs just a tiny bit extra. But that thing about walking away and not looking at it for a while is really, really good advice. And not only for these sort of less is more type of pieces, but whenever you start hearing a little voice in your head that tells you to just keep going, take a break, don't look at it for a while. Because I've had pieces where I sort of thought it was finished and I didn't like it at all. I thought it was ugly. I got very upset and annoyed, and I just curled up the paper and threw it in the trash. One time I had actually taken a picture of this piece that I ended up throwing out. A couple of days later, I accidentally saw it on my phone, and I thought, why did I throw this out? This was actually really, really good. So sometimes just walk away. Now, back to the piece. I'm going to speed this up for you a little because I'm just going to remove some ink. This was not really what I wanted. So, and this is really easy to do on our paper. It just comes right off, no stains. So I'm going to do a last little bit right here, and I want it to sort of be a little bit bigger than the others. So I got these very different shapes, and I want it to sort of sway a little, go out a little to the side. I feel like this is coming along pretty nicely. I think, especially with this last one, there are going to be different shapes and sizes, and the metallic is sort of making it pop a little. I think with this last one, I'm going to try and sort of move it out a little to the corner. That's really going to give it a little more of that movement and that flow that I was talking about. Nice little white gaps, still a lot of negative space left on this one. I'm pretty happy with this. And I'm loving this color current. It's where it's really dark. It's sort of this very soft, almost a little bit grayish purple. And then when you start to sort of blend it out, it becomes almost a little soft pink. I want to remove a little something up here. I want it to sort of go out a little towards the corner, so I'm just going to remove a little bit of it, give it a little more shape. I'm starting to feel pretty happy about this, actually. There is some really dark spots in the center, but I feel like maybe there could be a little more, give it a little bit more of that contrast that I was talking about. I feel like it needs just a little bit, so I'm just going to add a little extra. I'm going to get a brush, and I'm just going to fill in a little bit with that current so it gets really, really dark in the center. Just put a few drops on and just use my brush to sort of get it where I want it to be. So I hope some of these tips will help you when you're trying to do something really simple and this whole less is more concept. I hope that you can use some of these things. It's really the little details that will make sure that something very simple doesn't end up boring. These little details will sort of make the whole thing just come alive on the paper. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think, and as always, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that little notification bell so that you don't miss any of my next videos. I already got a few ideas for some stuff that I want to do. If you have something you want me to talk about or something specific you want me to show, just let me know. Now I'm pretty happy with this. Gonna leave it just the way it is. Thank you so much for watching, and I will be back soon with some more stuff.